Hello and welcome to another episode of BB's Finds. I'm Blake B. This is the only show on YouTube where a guy extemporaneously speaks about his collections while sitting in a closet that's shared by his wife. Um, Wife's clothes behind me, as you can see. Not going to talk about that today. It's been a little while since I've recorded. I've been kind of catching up on things here and there. Just trying to get it organized as much as possible, etc. Today, I'm going to be discussing soundtracks, records, LPs, soundtrack stuff, mostly genre based, some documentary stuff in there as well. Science fiction and Western, probably the two main genres I collect, as well as some fantasy. This is sort of creme de la creme of the collection. There's some stuff that I left downstairs that I could maybe do another video on some other time, or it's fun stuff that I like to have, but it's nothing that's too mind blowing. It's just fun stuff to listen to. Wanted to talk before I do about this collection about the economics of collecting right now. We live in a very strange economic time where the desire for assets or certain types of assets could change by the minute. What I'm finding is, as a reseller, someone who does at least part-time reselling, I'm not able to acquire inventory. I am able, however, to still sell fairly well, based on my competitive pricing model, which is in line with my business model. I'm not changing my business model. I think a guy like me who's a part timer, fairly well insulated from the economic times. The problem is not being able to acquire the inventory. Now, I mention this because some people maybe, or especially people that do full time reselling, maybe in cash mode where they just want cash. They need cash to survive. So that means sell offs. That got me thinking a bit about things like comic book shops, record shops, places that typically in times when consumer confidence is higher, that people have a little bit more expendable income to throw at things. I think right now people are so concentrated on accumulating cash for their own question mark for the future, because we don't know what's going to happen. In terms of the economics, everyone's just mainly trying to stay afloat right now. It's very similar to collecting is very similar to the stock market. The stock prices they've been not so great as of late. I actually myself have a little bit of skin in the game in the stock market, but not much. This is just again, it is a very interesting time that we live in, where I think the inventory situation for resellers, again, not very, people can't go out and get things because shops are closed for the most part. So a lot of people are doing it online. A lot of people are acquiring inventory online, is my line of thinking, and a lot of the prices are declining because of it. The demand is a lot lower for certain items, so to compensate people, sources of where these inventories come from are dropping their prices as well to meet that decline in demand, so they can keep moving products. For a guy like me who just mainly does thrift stores, and probably for people who do garage sales and estate sales as well, just an extremely interesting time. And I'm just wondering how many faces I'm going to see, of people that, that I know. I think I are full time resellers. After this whole thing kind of settles and goes away, and life gets back to normal, I think a lot of these guys are probably changing their business model, probably doing a lot of like retail arbitrage type things with companies and restaurants, and just pricing, just playing pricing games and volume selling. What I kind of, how I kind of have my business model is a lot of the inventory I have is very unique items, so it's a specialty shop. I'm not relying on selling Stephen King books, or I have sold Stephen King books, but they're like first edition Richard Bach, so it's like stuff like that. I don't sell like newer Stephen King books or anything like that. But especially these book resellers, I'm just thinking a lot of them are going to get completely whacked by the over the head by this thing. Um, they have inventory probably if they're an FBA seller on Amazon, they have inventory at Amazon, so they're fine there. It's just that acquisition of inventory is becoming a problem, I think, for a lot of people. Um, it's time consuming to look online for things, obviously, and um, try to find inventory that fits in a price model low enough. For me, I have my own kind of algorithm in my head about my pricing, and there's decisions I make in terms of buying things to resell that most people, I think some of the resellers would probably buy some of the stuff that I pass on just because it's profit, just anything like their volume, again, their volume game guys. For me, it's not worth my time and effort to try to sell some of this stuff that's maybe a little bit lower priced or something that I can't make a good margin on. I'm not going to give away my trade secrets very much in this video beyond that. But just thinking about the economics of collecting. I do watch a YouTube channel called Alpha Investments. I typically watch a couple videos a week. The guy, his name is Rudy. He makes like, I don't know, 3-4 videos a day. It's all about it's kind of a microcosm for economics, if you think about it. But it's all about Magic the Gathering cards, and especially vintage and reserve list Magic the Gathering cards. Stuff from the 1990s that have extremely high value. This guy is probably I would probably peg him at the number one reseller of that stuff probably in the world. He really knows what he's doing in terms of the high grade of the cards, grading the cards and getting value. He's basically what he's seeing on his end. And by the way, he's a ex Wall Street guy, so he really knows his economics. He's really dug in deep on that end. He's noticing a trend where there's a sell off because people need cash, so he's buying these old collections, up to move them. But that being said, the market's kind of declining. Because of the consumer confidence and the fact that people are trying to position themselves into cash more than assets, other types of assets these days. It's an interesting channel if you have time. He's a humorous guy. Some people, the humor might rub them a little bit wrong, but I think he means well. He's funny. He will open up boxes of cards for people like Patreons and things like that. Nothing crazy like in the vintage arena, mostly newer type boxes and things like that. He's into newer products. He even speculates a little bit on the newer release sets as well, which is interesting because that almost seems like a nickel and dime game for him, because he's dealing with instead of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, he's dealing with hundreds when trying to move that stuff. So I think the newer stuff is more of a volume game for him. The older stuff is just more of he's a collector, similar to me. He's a collector by trade. He's got his own stuff, but then he just knows how to move it and he knows how to sell it. Very knowledgeable dude. Just I would say, if you're remembering back to your economics class in high school, or maybe economics 101 in college, it's basically what it's all about. The collectors and reselling market. Okay, so that stuff aside, business aside, we're not going to bore you with any more of that. About 9 minutes into the video here. So today I did mention we're going to talk about records, soundtracks in particular, science fiction, westerns, some documentary stuff, things like that. In the past, I have shown the Dune, the LP I have of the Dune soundtrack done by Toto, with Brian Eno doing the Prophecy theme. I'm not including that one in this video, and I'm not also including the John Carpenter Escape from New York LP that I found, the original pressing. I found that one for about $1, and I got the Dune soundtrack back in the day from a record shop, a used record shop for like $3. The vinyl market's obviously, thinking of economics, I think personally the bubble is gonna burst pretty soon, especially for newer pressings, and I think what we're gonna see is more and more thrift stores having more and more donations to them, because people are either not interested in this anymore and getting rid of things and just trying to make space during this whole time that we live in, or just cleaning the house, spring cleaning type thing, maybe late spring cleaning now, but nonetheless, I know we're doing a little bit of that as well. Not so much with records, but I think the demand for records because of the times is the consumer confidence is fairly low in terms of extraneous money and spending on things. So I think if it's pretty much a buyer's market right now. I think prices are going to on the decline. I've said for many years that the bubble for LPs is going to burst. I like them because they bring me joy, and I've always pretty much have always collected records going back to high school, punk records, and going to concerts and buying 7 inches from bands and things like that. And then I just as I grew up and had a little bit of disposable income, I bought some records at record shops and things like that. Mostly in the last few years, I haven't been acquiring much in terms of inventory. It's been kind of drying up. I've been getting most of my collectibles from thrift stores, looking for things that are way underpriced and things like that. There's some stuff I pick up here and there that I want to listen to, but for the most part, it's drying up. These what I refer to as middle-aged men just go on, things are $1. They'll just go throw money at it and then try to either put it in their storage unit and deal with it later. Some of them might, and hey, they might be doing pretty well right now in this time, just trying to sell based on volume. Or just people that think they can price things up, and good for them if they can. So let's kick it off. First up, we have one of my favorite soundtracks. It's a television soundtrack. I actually have 2 copies of this record. We have The Music of Cosmos, the Carl Sagan PBS documentary. It's a 10-part series from the 1980s. If anyone knows me, they know of my love for Carl Sagan and science in particular, and his views on science and our place in the universe. What's very unique about this soundtrack is most of it is classical music. We've got some very well-known classical pieces in this, including the Blue Danube, I believe, somewhere. I might be wrong. Blue Danube? No. Rite of Spring. Sorry, Rite of Spring. We also have Vangelis, one of my favorite film score composers. He did the Blade Runner soundtrack. He's got Heaven and Hell on here. It's kind of bookended. So the first song on side 1 is Heaven and Hell, and then this last song on side 2 is it's a reprise of Heaven and Hell. We got some stuff by Pachelbel. We got the Canon by Pachelbel, some Vivaldi stuff, some Bach. I'm not really a classical music guy. I've kind of got a passing interest in it. There was a time when I was a little more interested in it, just from a musical structural standpoint of how things, how some of the original musicians, I guess you can call them, formulated music, and it's more of a mathematical and structural thing for me. Listening to that stuff and examining that stuff and listening to those sounds. We've also Stravinsky's Rites of Spring on here, as I mentioned. Stravinsky, he's a pretty good contemporary composer. I consider him contemporary because he was around in the 20th century. We also have another copy of the Cosmos right here. Speaking of Vangelis, this is something that I picked up a couple years ago. It's the original Blade Runner soundtrack. This is what's unique about this is this was not available on as a record or as an LP until it was released. I think this is the first time you can ever buy it outside of getting something that's a bootleg. They didn't even release the soundtrack on CD until, at least the Vangelis version, until the mid 90s, I believe. There's an orchestra version that was released sometime in the 1980s, but it wasn't a true Vangelis soundtrack. I will do a video soon about Blade Runner stuff because I have some Blade Runner stuff and probably tie in some Sid Mead stuff. We've got various versions of the soundtrack. This is 180 gram. I typically don't buy 180 gram stuff just because it's kind of hokey to me. It seems like almost like manufactured scarcity a little bit. And I'm not an audiophile by any means. I just love music. I guess I am an audiophile in the fact that I love music, but not an audiophile in the fact that I have to have like the best gear and the best pressings and things like that. My ears are shit anyway. So we've got This is the limited edition. I think it's a red vinyl version. It's great. It's one of the best soundtracks, at least to me, of all time. Here on the cover, you got Rick Deckard and Rachel, the android, the niece of Tyrell, the founder of the Tyrell Corporation. She's not actually an android. She's they're replicants. It's a little confusing because the thought is that they're robot people, but they're actually they're organic organisms that are basically grown or cultivated. They're not robots like they are in Westworld. It's yeah, it's great. There's a 3 CD release that's really fantastic that has a lot of Vangelis outtakes on it. Vangelis is the Greek composer, Greek guy who made the music, and he wrote most of this on a Casio CS 80, I believe. There's some YouTube videos you can watch, pretty great, of him just wailing away on that thing. Here we have the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack. This is done by Hans Zimmer. It's a fantastic album as well. A lot of the sounds harken back to the original Vangelis soundtrack. I was kind of disappointed that Vangelis didn't have more of a say in this one. But I can't really do much about that. From a fan service standpoint, in my mind when the movie was announced, I was like thinking of bands and musicians who could potentially do the soundtrack and make it great. I think some of the names I thought were maybe Stars of the Lid. This guy, One O Tricks Point Never. He's an electronic musician. Maybe Aphex Twin, things like that. Maybe Aphex Twin's a little too cyberpunky for this. I mean, it's a cyberpunk movie after all, but there's a few groups that could have done it pretty well. Even a group like the Icelandic group Sigur Rós or Sigur Ró. I always messed that pronunciation up, but they could have potentially done something like this as well. More instrumental type music. But I think it turned out fantastic. I couldn't be happier with the way the soundtrack turned out. Next up, we have a Stanley Kubrick movie. We have this is a unique pressing. This is Walter Carlos's Clockwork Orange. This is on the back. It says exclusive, the only recording of Walter Carlos' complete original score for Stanley Kubrick's award-winning film, A Clockwork Orange. Walter Carlos went on to be Wendy Carlos, one of the first trans musicians of our day, way ahead of the curve in terms of both how they live their life as well as the music that they make. It's a lot of things. Wendy Carlos, a classically trained musician. They incorporate a lot of electronic stuff into their works as well. Later works. Some of the earlier works was electronic organ, classical music and things like that. So there's a lot of that actually on the Clockwork Orange soundtrack. A lot of Beethoven and things like that kind of play into the themes of the movie. So this is the exclusive original score. Got a couple other copies. Has I'm a Kubrick head. I should probably do a Kubrick video at one point as well. This is a different pressing of the record. It's not just the score. This has some of the other at the time Walter Carlos music, and here we've got another copy of it as well because I'm a bit of a Kubrick head. We've got on this one some pencil markings on the back. Hey, I don't mind as long as the music sound good. Don't mind the pencil markings on the back. I bought records before without even sleeves or anything like that. As long as I can listen to it. So that's that. Here's a picture of one of my droogs on the front there. My guy Alex, played by Malcolm McDowell. Up next, this is a very unique item. Conan the Barbarian soundtrack, Basil Polidoris. This is actually a promo, and it's got a gold embossed MCA logo here. One of the best, I think, fantasy soundtracks for money. That money can buy. Anvil of Crom. It's got some spoken parts on it. Riddle of Steel, Riders of Doom, CD versions. I was chasing down the CD version of this for a while. Actually got the LP first. The CD versions of it are a little easier to come by now, but for some reason, because as people whittle down their CD collections and things like that, but for a time they were a little harder to find. I think there's not like a deluxe version, but like an extended version of the CD as well. It's a fantastic one. I think it's probably Polydorus's finest work. He also did the soundtrack to RoboCop. He's just a great composer as well. It really gets the feel for the movie, and if you watch the movie, it's like almost like watching like Star Wars, where the music is a character itself. I feel like that really speaks to like stuff like Blade Runner and Conan. Up next we have Fantastic Planet. This is done by Alain Gourjour, French composer. Here on the back you have it says Fantastic Planet in French. This is a repress. This is not an original. One of my favorite animated films. It's a bizarre movie. The music is very funky. A lot of like hip hop guys reference it. I think I saw a video once with like Madlib where he was listening. He was in some like vinyl library and he pulled an original pressing of this. It was in France. They were in France in the YouTube clip. He pulled an original pressing of this and was playing it. But it's like it's one of those soundtracks that you can just throw on in the background. There's no vocals or anything like that, and it's pretty good. Again, it's very funky. I would almost say it's like if you guys are into like David Axelrod or things like that, it's almost like that, maybe even more funkier than him. It's very slow, kind of prodding, and there's a lot of like wah-wah pedal and things like that. It's just a great soundtrack. I'm actually due for a rewatch of this movie. When am I not? So next up we have Ennio Morricone, Once Upon a Time in the West. Trying to think if I had I think at one point I did have a copy of Good, Bad, and the Ugly. I think I gave it to someone though, because I got the CD of it. But yeah, Once Upon a Time in the West is a great Ennio Morricone spaghetti western soundtrack. There's a lot of like Jew's harp and things like that on the title title theme. It's a great movie too. I think when most people think about films that Morricone scored, it's always like the big three is what I refer to, the Man with No Name trilogy. So it's the Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars, and For a Few Dollars More. Once Upon a Time in the West though it's a great story. It's a good movie, and you kind of know what you're getting with Morricone. He's got some really good guitar work on his albums as well for a guy who's scoring film stuff in those days. So that's that. And by the way, this isn't too hard to pick up. It's just a really cool album and fun to listen to. You can find that pretty much any used record shop. Next up, we got Planet of the Apes. Jerry Goldsmith. I procured this one at a thrift store. I believe it was Salvation Army for $1. This one has it's Planet of the Apes, man. It's great. In terms of science fiction soundtracks. It's got to be up there. I wouldn't say it's like in the top 10 or anything, but it's definitely worth a shot if you haven't heard it. I think the music, much like the other stuff I'm talking about, is definitely a part of the movie, almost like a character in the movie. Goldsmith, I think, did a lot of stuff with like Star Trek, and he's a very prolific composer. Up next, we have more Kubrick. This is sort of I consider this almost the corner piece of this collection. We got Bob Underwood's copy, man. Bob Underwood. I have no idea who that is, but this is the Shining soundtrack. This is getting actually a lot of prominence. There's only 4 tracks on this, by the way, but it's getting a lot of prominence. There's a couple of Wendy Carlos songs on this. The main title from Shining, as well as the Rocky Mountains sequence. And then there's some stuff from the experimental composers Ligeti and Penderecki. So this some of this music has been featured in things like one want to say like Westworld and David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return. In that wacky episode, I think it's episode 8. I messed that one up in a couple of videos back, but the episode 8 of The Return, there's some of the Penderecki stuff going on. It's just if anyone knows me, they know The Shining is my favorite horror movie of all time, and man, I can't tell you this music like is just amazing stuff. The this LP, I don't know if they've repressed it. This is an original pressing. I think I bought it on credit. It's one of these like impulse credit buys because it's like, I was probably at Amoeba Records and it was like the first and only time I've actually seen this thing in the wild. Probably don't care to divulge how much I paid for it, but I'll have you know I probably traded in some other records to get it, so it's not that bad that I took that kind of a hit for it. Again, corner piece of collection. I had a guy living next door to me who was an electronic musician for some time, and he came over a few times to look at my record collection. I was like, most proud of this one when I was showing off my stuff to him. He was pretty taken with it. Then next up we got Shogun Assassin. All right, so this one, this soundtrack is amazing. If you're not familiar with the film, Shogun Assassin's basically the American edited down version of the Lone Wolf and Cub, the first 2 Lone Wolf and Cub films. You can find a copy of Shogun Assassin pretty easily on DVD. I think they're like $20 mostly online. I've got a DVD, Blu-ray. I got a Blu-ray copy of the Shogun Assassin, and as well as the Lone Wolf and Cub Criterion box set. The film itself, kind of referential, or this films I should say, not film, because there's multiple films. Referential in The Mandalorian, in the Shogun Assassin and the Lone Wolf and Cub. It's about this guy, the samurai, who's got a son. He's protecting him. They go on journeys. It's very similar to things that occur in The Mandalorian, which is the Disney Plus Star Wars show featuring a Mandalorian bounty hunter protecting a young person. I don't want to give away too much. Spoilers. Baby Yoda. That's what people call him, but it's not. I don't think it's really him. I think it can't be him. Obviously, it's some other creature that's his ilk. But what's interesting about this is the Shogun Assassin soundtrack was never released on is an LP. It wasn't released in record format. It was to the public, that is. So there was when Shogun Assassin movie came out, I think when they edited the Lone Wolf and Cubs 1 and 2 back in like the early 1980s, I want to say, there was a promo release of the Shogun Assassin LP. This is like a repressing. Some company called Cinewax does this thing. Yeah, it's 1980. Some company called Cinewax does this. These repress companies just kind of take whatever is kind of hip or cool at the time. At the time they're pressing the records and repress things, get the rights to it and stuff. The music itself is prominently featured in one of my favorite hip hop albums, which is the Liquid Swords album by GZA. The samples from this are all over that thing, and the Wu-Tang Clan guys obviously love this. I think RZA, he did most of the production on that album, and he probably, my guess is he either when he was making that music, he either had that promo copy, or he was able to somehow from the movies get the maybe like a VHS version of the movie at the time in the 90s, get samples of the film and rip it to his MPC or whatever he was using to produce the albums. It's just fantastic stuff. It's weird. If you want, to put something on to have your spouse, you play that game where your spouse says, "What the hell are you listening to?" I recommend this one. We play that game in our house sometimes. Then lastly, we've got another Wendy Carlos album. This is the Tron soundtrack. I remember being like probably like 18 or 19 and trying to order like the Tron CD soundtrack. I'd never seen it like in a store and having to like specialty order it. But it's a fantastic soundtrack. Just like classic, Wendy Carlos stuff. Very electronic, very kind of spacey. Tron has the distinction of being one of the first movies to use computer CGI effects in the 1980s and things like that. Just it's a fun film to watch, and they did the remake Tron Legacy, or not the remake, but the kind of the sequel, Tron Legacy. Maybe I want to say like 10 years ago. Wow, has it been that long? Jeez, I'm getting old. I remember being at the Comic-Con that year when they were promoting it, and me being me, this is before fandom was at its heights it is now. I mean, it was still pretty high, but I signed up to go visit Flynn's Arcade, and I got some coins and things like that I actually got up there. That from the arcade, they give you a little pouch with coins, and we got to see some of the stuff from the Legacy movie, and then some of the stuff, some of the props and things from the original Tron movie. That was very unique. I'm glad I got to do that. Shout out to my buddy Matt, the Halloween guy, for bringing me along. At the time, he was working for an unnamed toy company, so he got to take a +1 on that gig, and it was me. The Tron soundtrack, fantastic. Check it out. So that's pretty much it in terms of what I wanted to show today. I had some suggestions. There's some stuff about Axl Rose being in the news. I'll let you guys look that up. I don't want to get into politics these days, but someone suggested me doing a Guns N' Roses video. I've only got actually 2 Guns N' Roses records, a copy of Appetite for Destruction. It's not with the original cover. It's an original pressing, but it's not with the original cover. And then I've got GNR Lies as well. So there's really not much in the way of Guns N' Roses. I think from this video, I do want to do a Kubrick, probably a Kubrick and a Blade Runner video eventually. I do have a lot of like Kubrick and Blade Runner centric books. There's, it's mostly limited to music, books, and the DVDs and things like that. There are some Blade Runner toys, I want to say, and comic books and things like that. I just never been really into trying to procure those, and I haven't seen those in the wild, like thrift stores or anything. If I did, I'd pick them up. Just because they're cool. That's pretty much it. We're at about the 33-minute mark here. I hope everyone's well, and if you have any suggestions, let me know. If you have any questions or want to discuss your collections and maybe see if you got anything that's worth any money, or kind of fire things off of me, that's fine. I'm cool with that. I'm cool. I got some time. I don't mind. Dude extemporaneously talks about his collections while sitting in wife's closet. Out.